She was shamed as an Omega, until the Alpha King noticed her scent and changed everything. Shadows clung to every corner, and the scent of wet stone and burning wood hung thick in the air. It was in this city, filled with whispers and secrets, that Lyra lived her quiet, shamed existence. She was an Omega, a mark that made her invisible to most, a target for scorn and ridicule to others. Every day, she walked through the marketplace with her head bowed, her hands clutching the tattered shawl that covered her shoulders. Merchants sneered as she passed, tossing coins at the floor rather than into her outstretched hand. Children laughed cruelly, mocking her limp wrist and the faint, almost imperceptible scent that marked her as different. It was a scent she had inherited from her mother, a fragrance both rare and cursed in the eyes of Ashmere's people. Lyra had grown used to the shame, to the sharp tongues and pointed fingers. Still, a part of her burned with quiet defiance. She would not break, even when the world seemed determined to crush her spirit. She moved through the crowd like a shadow, unseen but not silent, her eyes sharp, memorizing everything, the faces, the movements, the tiny details that would help her survive. It was on such a day that she noticed him, the Alpha King, Kale. He moved through the streets with a presence that seemed to bend the air itself, his steps silent but commanding. Nobles and commoners alike gave him space, bowing as he passed. His dark cloak swirled behind him, and the faint scent of his aura, the Alpha, was unmistakable. It was powerful, dangerous, and yet strangely magnetic. Lyra had only glimpsed him before from a distance, in whispered tales or through cracks in the palace gates. Seeing him in person was like feeling the wind before a storm, an invisible force that made the hair on her arms stand up. She lowered her gaze instinctively, trying not to breathe too heavily, but the moment her scent brushed the edges of his awareness, Kale froze. He did not move forward, he did not speak. He simply paused as if the air itself had whispered something to him. His dark eyes swept over the crowd, searching until they fell on her. Lyra's heart stopped. It was impossible, she thought. He could not possibly see her. Not her, the shamed Omega who was nothing but a shadow in the eyes of the city. And yet, his gaze lingered, and she felt a pull, a recognition, as if he could sense something in her that no one else had ever noticed. The market erupted in its usual chaos, shouts, laughter, the banging of wooden stalls. But Lyra felt as if she were moving through a bubble of silence. She wanted to turn and run, to hide, but her legs refused. Then came the laughter that always followed her. A group of young nobles, barely out of boyhood, had recognized her and began to mock her scent, their voices high and cruel. "Look, the broken little Omega," one of them sneered. "Doesn't even belong in the streets. Go back to your shadow hole." The others laughed and the crowd joined in. Lyra's cheeks burned, and for a moment the shame threatened to swallow her whole. She bent lower, wishing invisibility was more than a dream. But Kale moved forward then, his stride long and sure. He stopped just in front of her, his presence so intense that the laughter around her faltered and died. He did not speak, but the weight of his eyes pressed against her like the first heavy rains of autumn. The nobles stiffened, whispering among themselves. She's the Omega," one of them stammered. Kale's gaze did not leave Lyra. Slowly, deliberately, he extended a hand, palm up, not in command but in invitation. "Come with me," he said, his voice deep and smooth, carrying an authority that made the city seem still. Lyra hesitated. Fear warred with curiosity. Could she trust him? This was the Alpha King, a man who ruled the land with power and fear, yet somehow he had chosen her, seen her. Her scent, once a mark of shame, seemed to hum between them, a silent tether she did not understand. The nobles stepped back, uncertain, muttering to each other, but Kale ignored them. Lyra placed her hand in his, trembling. The touch was electric, a warmth that coursed through her like sunlight through frozen earth. Without another word, he led her through the winding streets, through narrow alleys and past doors that had never opened to her before. They arrived at a quiet square, small and hidden, where the fog clung like silk and the city's noises seemed distant. Kale stopped, finally letting go of her hand, though the connection lingered in the air like a whisper. You, you are unlike any Omega I have sensed, Kale said, his voice low, almost reverent. There is power in you, Lyra, strength that hides behind your fear. I have been searching for it, though I did not know what it was I sought. Lyra's chest tightened. His words were beautiful and terrifying. Who was he to see her, truly see her, in a world that had only ever turned its back? I am nothing, she whispered, though her voice was steady despite the tremor in her hands. Kale shook his head slowly, his dark eyes softening for the briefest moment. You are everything, and yet you are also in danger. They will not forgive your presence, not here, not in the streets. Your life will be threatened if you stay. Fear surged through her. She had lived her entire life believing she was worthless, that the world's shame was her fate. And yet in Kale's presence the shame felt fragile, like a veil that could be lifted. Then why do you care? She asked, voice almost a whisper. Kale looked away for a heartbeat as if the answer pained him. Because I cannot ignore you, because you're sent, it calls to me. And because I see in you what no one else does. The words were dangerous, and yet they filled her with a longing she could not name. Kale stepped closer, his shadow falling over her, and for a fleeting moment the city, the shame, the coldness of her life, all of it, disappeared. But reality returned with the harsh scrape of a boot on stone. A nobleman had followed them, his expression twisted in fury. "Your Majesty," he cried, "what madness is this? That Omega, she has no place in your presence. She is a disgrace." Kale's eyes snapped open, dark as storm clouds. He turned to the man slowly, deliberately, the kind of calm that made men tremble. "She has more place than you will ever know," he said, each word heavy, each syllable a command. The noble faltered, and the power in Kale's gaze sent him stumbling back. Lyra felt her pulse quicken. This man, this terrifying, powerful man, had chosen her, protected her, and yet she did not fully understand why or what she had awakened in him. The fog seemed thicker now, curling around them like a cloak. Lyra shivered, but it was not from cold. It was the realization that her life had changed, that the invisible chains of shame had begun to crack. Kale extended his hand again. "Come," he said, softer this time, almost a plea. "There is more to you than you know, and there is more to me than the world allows. Walk with me, Lyra, trust me." Her fingers hovered over his. She wanted to say no, wanted to retreat into the safety of invisibility, but something deep inside her, the part that had always burned quietly against the world's cruelty, told her to take his hand. And so she did. As they walked together through the misty streets of Ashmere, something shifted. The city, the shadows, the whispers of shame, they no longer held power over her. Not entirely, not while he was near. Yet as the lanterns flickered and the fog deepened, Lyra felt a stirring of unease. There was more at play here than mere curiosity or protection. Kale carried his own burdens, shadows that clung to him as tightly as her shame clung to her. And the more she sensed his darkness, the more she realized that their fates were intertwined in ways neither of them could yet comprehend. The Alpha King had noticed her scent, and in doing so, he had changed everything. As they reached the edge of the marketplace, where the city's noise faded into silence, Lyra dared to look up at him. Kale's dark eyes met hers, a mixture of command, curiosity, and something she could not yet name, something powerful, terrifying, and beautiful. The world outside still buzzed with judgment and cruelty, but here, in the hush of fog and shadow, a single truth glimmered between them. For the first time in her life, Lyra did not feel invisible, and yet a shadow flickered at the edge of her thoughts. What did it mean that the Alpha King had noticed her, that he had chosen her? And what price would she pay for the bond that had already begun to grow, silent but undeniable, between them? She could not know, not yet. But she would not forget. The palace of Ashmere rose like a dark jewel over the city, its spires piercing the gray sky and its walls shrouded in mystery. The fog from the streets below seemed to climb the towers, curling through windows and balconies, as if it wanted to whisper secrets to those who dared listen. Within its cold, echoing halls, Lyra walked beside Cale, her steps hesitant, her heart pounding like a drum of warning and anticipation. She had never been inside the palace, never been anywhere so grand and intimidating. The walls gleamed with polished stone, the floors smooth with obsidian tiles that reflected her timid steps. Guards lined the corridors, their eyes sharp and calculating, yet none dared interrupt her passage. The Alpha King himself led her, and that alone commanded obedience. Lyra's mind was a whirlwind. Only hours ago she had been a shamed Omega, mocked in the streets and scorned by strangers. And now she walked beside the most powerful man in the kingdom, chosen, or perhaps claimed, by a force she barely understood. The strange pull between them made her pulse uneven, and she struggled to control the tremor in her hands. Cale's presence was constant, like the shadow of a storm cloud that followed her wherever she went. His cloak brushed the floor, his boots silent, but his aura, the scent of authority, power, and something wild, filled the space around them. Lyra felt it cling to her, and with every step she realized it was impossible to pretend she was invisible to him. "Stay close," Cale said without turning his head. His voice was low, calm, yet carried an edge that made her instinctively obey. "The palace is full of eyes, but most cannot see what matters." Lyra nodded silently. She had learned long ago that obedience could save her, yet something about Cale's command stirred more than fear. It sparked a flicker of courage she had buried deep inside. They entered a large chamber at the heart of the palace. Tall windows let in little light, the moon's silver glow washing the walls in cold luminescence. Tapestries hung like silent witnesses to history, depicting kings, queens, and battles long past. In the center of the room, a fire burned low in a stone hearth, casting flickering shadows that danced like living spirits. Cale turned to face her at last. "You must understand," he said, his dark eyes studying her carefully. "Your presence here is dangerous. You are an Omega, and your scent it awakens more than curiosity." Lyra swallowed hard. "Awakens?" she asked, her voice trembling. "I do not understand." He stepped closer, and the faint light caught the angles of his face, sharp, severe, yet hauntingly beautiful. "It awakens power, in me, in others. It stirs emotions that the court cannot control. They would see you destroyed for it." She shivered, a mixture of fear and something unnameable that tightened her chest. "Then why did you bring me here?" Cale's eyes softened, but only for a moment. "Because I need to see for myself, because you are different. There is strength in you that even you do not know, and because I cannot ignore it, I cannot ignore you." Lyra's breath caught. His words were dangerous, and yet they were intoxicating. She had lived a life of rejection, of whispered shame and cold avoidance. And now the most powerful man in the kingdom had not only noticed her, he had called her forward, acknowledged her, claimed a connection she did not fully understand. "Different how?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. Cale hesitated, as if measuring each word. "Your scent carries what most do not. It carries resilience, hidden strength, a fire beneath the shame. I have never encountered another like it." Lyra blinked. No one had ever spoken to her like that, never recognized what was inside her beneath the surface. Her heart ached with longing, but also with fear. How could someone like him see someone like her and not despise her? You see me?" she asked softly. Cale's lips curved into a faint, unreadable smile. "I see more than you realize, and that is dangerous, Lyra. For both of us." The tension between them was nearly tangible, a tight cord pulled taut in the quiet room. Lyra wanted to step closer, to reach for the warmth in his presence, but her mind warned her. He is a king. He holds power over life and death. This connection, as much as it called to her, was forbidden. Yet Cale closed the distance, until their hands almost brushed. The air between them seemed to hum. I cannot tell if I am drawn to you because of your power or because of what you awaken in me, he said, his voice low, almost a growl of restraint. Either way, it is undeniable. Lyra's pulse raced. She had never been the center of someone's attention, not truly. The weight of his gaze, the raw intensity in his voice, made her knees weak. She wanted to turn away, to run back into the streets where no one could see her, but some deeper part of her, the part that had always been ignored, silenced, and shamed, leaned toward him. Kale's eyes darkened, a storm beneath calm waters. Do you know what it means, Lyra, to hold such power over me? Lyra shook her head, terrified. I do not. I do not even know what it is. Then we will discover it together, he said. His tone was gentle but commanding. But you must trust me completely. Can you do that? The words hung between them, heavy and dangerous. Trust was foreign to Lyra. She had trusted no one, not the merchants, not the nobles, not even her own family. And yet, there was something in Kale that made her want to take the leap, even if she fell. I will try, she said, her voice trembling but firm. Kale's lips pressed into a thin line and he nodded once. Good, that is all I ask for now. The sound of footsteps echoed in the chamber. Lyra turned, startled, but Kale's hand brushed hers, light, protective. Do not fear, they will not see what I see. It was true. The courtiers, the nobles, the servants, they had no idea what stirred beneath the surface. They saw only an Omega, a weak and insignificant figure to be mocked or ignored. But Kale saw her. He had broken the invisible chains that had bound her for so long. For the first time in her life, Lyra felt seen, truly seen. And with that vision came a dangerous thrill, a spark of desire that she could not name. She wanted to stay near him, to hear his voice, to understand the strange pull that connected them. Kale's gaze softened again, but the storm never fully left his eyes. You must understand, he said quietly, that the court will never accept this. They will plot against you, test you, perhaps even try to destroy you. You are not safe here, not fully, but I will protect you as I can. Lyra nodded, swallowing hard. Protection from him was not just safety, it was a lifeline. But she could sense the weight of his words, the responsibility he carried. This was not mere curiosity or fleeting interest. This was a bond that had begun to shape both of their fates. Time passed quietly, with only the flickering fire and the occasional whisper of wind against the windows. Lyra felt the tension in her chest slowly ease, replaced by a mix of fear and wonder. Kale, standing nearby, radiated authority and restraint, yet there was a softness he allowed only her to see. It was fleeting, like a shadow passing through the light, but it made her heart ache with longing. Suddenly, a distant sound broke the fragile calm, a faint scream, carried on the wind from somewhere deep within the palace. Lyra froze. Kale's expression tightened, his hand moving instinctively to the hilt of a hidden dagger at his belt. Stay close, he whispered, his voice low and commanding. Do not let anyone separate us. Lyra's pulse quickened. Danger had arrived, but so had a strange exhilaration. She realized that with Kale, even fear was different. It was sharp, electric, and alive, and it made her feel powerful. The two moved together, shadows slipping through the corridors until they came to a locked door. Kale pressed a hidden latch, and the door swung open to reveal a small chamber bathed in moonlight. Inside, a single ornate mirror reflected their images, Lyra's wide-eyed innocence, Kale's dark intensity, and the space seemed to pulse with the energy between them. Kale stepped closer, and Lyra could feel the heat radiating from him, the magnetic pull that drew her in. This is the truth, he said quietly. We cannot deny it, Lyra. Your scent, your presence, it has changed me, and it will change the world around us whether they accept it or not. Lyra looked into his eyes, and for a moment the fear, the shame, the loneliness, all of it vanished. There was only him, and the unspoken promise that something extraordinary awaited them both. Yet, even in this quiet, their bond was not safe. A shadow lingered beyond the walls, a whisper of danger that neither could ignore. The court would not allow this connection to flourish unchecked, and forces unseen were already stirring in the palace. Lyra swallowed hard, feeling both fear and longing mingle in her chest. She realized that whatever awaited them, the path forward would be treacherous, demanding courage, trust, and the willingness to face both power and desire together. Kale's hand brushed hers once more, and in that simple touch, Lyra felt the beginning of a bond that could neither be broken nor ignored. The night stretched before them, heavy with anticipation, mystery, and the unspoken promise of change. The Alpha King had noticed her scent. He had claimed her presence, and nothing, no shame, no fear, no whisper of the court could undo what had begun. But the danger that lingered in the shadows was patient, and it would not wait. Lyra's journey into a world of power, desire, and forbidden connection had only just begun. The forest beyond Ashmere stretched like an endless sea of black and silver, trees twisting toward the sky as if trying to touch the clouds. The wind whispered secrets through their branches, carrying the scent of damp earth and wild herbs. Lyra walked beside Kale, her cloak brushing the fallen leaves, her heart still racing from the events in the palace. They had fled the city in haste. Whispers of jealousy and treachery had reached the Alpha King before she could even understand their depth. Courtiers who had once ignored her now plotted in shadows, their envy sharp and dangerous. Kale had seen it coming, yet he had allowed it to reach a point where Lyra could no longer remain in the palace safely. "You must understand," Kale said, his voice cutting through the wind. "Your presence here is not merely a threat to the court. It is a threat to those who wish to control power through fear. They cannot tolerate someone like you, someone who can change the rules." Lyra swallowed hard. Her mind still reeled. She had felt the pull of her scent on Kale, had sensed the strange energy that connected them, but she had not yet understood what it could do, or why it affected him so. The world she thought she knew, the streets, the market, her shame, had been only a shadow of the forces now swirling around her. "And what about you?" she asked softly, her gaze fixed on the dark horizon. "Why do you care so much? Why not leave me in the streets where no one will notice?" Kale's jaw tightened, and he did not answer immediately. Instead, he led her along a narrow path between twisted trees, their shadows long and moving like living things. "Because I cannot," he said at last. "Because your scent, your power, it calls to something in me that I thought was lost, something I feared I could never feel again, and because I see you, not the shame, not the fear, but the strength that hides beneath it all." Lyra felt a shiver run down her spine. His words were a mixture of confession and warning, dangerous and intoxicating all at once. She had never been acknowledged like this, never seen as more than an omega, a shadow to be ignored or mocked. And now, the most powerful man she had ever known, the Alpha King himself, was not only seeing her, but recognizing something extraordinary inside her. The forest grew darker as they went deeper. Strange noises echoed between the trees, rustling leaves, snapping branches, the distant call of a creature she could not name. Yet Kale moved with the confidence of someone who belonged in the shadows, who could read danger before it struck. Lyra, despite her fear, felt a sense of security walking beside him. But it was also clear, the danger was not gone. A sudden movement caught their attention. From the shadowed edge of the path, a figure emerged, cloaked in black and carrying a staff that glimmered faintly with green light. Lyra's heart pounded. She had never seen magic so raw, so dangerous. Kale's eyes narrowed and his hand moved to the dagger at his belt. "You cannot hide," the figure hissed, voice sharp as ice. "The Omega must not reach the palace again. She will not disrupt what is meant to remain untouched." Lyra trembled. She did not understand the words, but she felt the weight behind them. Someone feared her, feared what she could become. And yet, before she could react, Kale stepped forward. "She is under my protection," he said, his voice low and commanding, carrying an authority that made the wind itself seem to pause. "Step back, or you will regret it." The figure laughed, a sound like breaking glass, and raised the staff. Green light flared, and the ground beneath them seemed to pulse. Lyra felt a sudden surge within her, a trembling energy she had never felt before. Her body stiffened and she realized something she had hidden even from herself. Cale's eyes widened slightly, the first hint of surprise she had ever seen on his face. "Your scent," he whispered, almost to himself. It is stronger than I thought. It awakens power in ways I cannot control." Lyra did not understand the words, but she felt it. A warmth, a fire, rising from within her chest, spreading to her hands and limbs. It was frightening, exhilarating, and she struggled to hold on to it. The cloaked figure faltered, taken aback by the sudden force that seemed to erupt from her very being. Cale moved closer, his presence steadying her, grounding her, yet also urging her forward. "Trust yourself, Lyra," he said. "Trust what you are. You have the power to protect yourself and me." For a moment, the forest held its breath. Then, with a trembling step, Lyra reached out with her newfound strength. A wave of energy pulsed outward, surrounding the figure in a green shimmer. The attacker staggered, dropping the staff, and fled into the shadows, leaving only the echo of whispered threats behind. Lyra sank to her knees, gasping. The forest seemed still again, the wind gentle, almost approving. Cale knelt beside her, his hand brushing her hair back from her face. "Do you see now?" he asked softly. "You are not powerless. You never were." Tears pricked her eyes. She had spent her life believing she was weak, believing her scent marked her as inferior. And yet in the heart of danger she had discovered something incredible, not only strength, but the ability to influence the world around her. Cale's gaze softened, almost tender. "There is more," he said quietly. "More you must learn, more you must accept, and I will guide you. But you must be willing to embrace who you are and what you can do." Lyra nodded, though her mind swirled with doubt and wonder. She had trusted him before in the city and the palace, and now she would trust him again despite the fear and the unknown. She had no choice. Cale was her guide through a world she had never imagined, and perhaps her protector in ways she could not yet understand. The night deepened, and they made their way to a hidden glade within the forest, a place where moonlight fell in silver pools and the air was thick with magic. Here, Cale finally allowed them to rest. A small fire burned, casting warmth and light across their faces. Lyra sat beside him, her hands trembling slightly as she tried to calm her racing heart. Cale's eyes lingered on her, dark and intense. "You must understand something," he said quietly. "The court, the kingdom, they will never accept this connection. They will plot against you, against us, against the very power you carry, but I will not abandon you, not now, not ever." Lyra looked at him, her chest tightening with a mix of fear and longing. "Why me?" she asked softly. "Why risk everything for someone like me?" Cale's expression darkened, his jaw tense. "Because I cannot ignore what you awaken in me. You are not merely an Omega. You are something extraordinary, and I would rather face the fury of the court than lose what we have begun." The words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken promise. Lyra felt a rush of emotion she had never known: desire, trust, and a fierce determination to rise above the shame that had defined her life. She knew in that moment that nothing would ever be the same again. Yet, as the fire crackled and shadows danced around them, Lyra sensed the weight of the danger still looming. There were forces at work far beyond the court's jealousy, forces that hungered for the power she carried, the bond she shared with the Alpha King. Cale seemed to sense her thoughts. "You feel it too," he said, his voice soft, almost gentle. "The danger is not gone. It waits, patient, watching. But together we can face it. You and I, if you trust yourself and if you trust me." Lyra nodded again, more firmly this time. Trust was a new feeling, fragile and frightening, but also exhilarating. She would have to embrace it or risk losing everything, including herself. The night stretched on, and for the first time in her life, Lyra felt the strange, heady mix of fear and strength that came from being truly seen, truly recognized and truly valued. Kale's presence beside her was a constant reminder that her life had changed, that she had stepped into a world of power and danger she had never imagined, and that the journey ahead would demand courage unlike anything she had ever known. As the moon rose high, casting silver light over the glade, Lyra allowed herself to rest against Kale, feeling the steady beat of his heart and the warmth of his aura. The forest around them seemed to hold its breath, as if acknowledging the bond that had formed between them, a bond that was as dangerous as it was powerful, as forbidden as it was necessary. But even as she felt this connection, even as the fire warmed her and the night whispered of possibility, Lyra knew that this was only the beginning. The forces that sought to destroy her, the secrets she had yet to uncover, the power that flowed within her, these things would not remain dormant for long. And Kale, the Alpha King, with all his strength and mystery, would have to face his own darkness alongside hers. The forest was quiet now, but shadows lingered, and the true test of their bond, their power, and their courage had not yet begun. The ruins of the old temple lay beyond the forest, hidden by mist and the tangled roots of ancient trees. Its walls, blackened by centuries of storms, were covered with moss, and the air smelled of damp stone and forgotten magic. Kale led Lyra through the archway, his steps measured, his expression unreadable beneath the moonlight. Lyra's heart pounded in her chest. The forest had taught her caution, the palace had taught her fear, and now, in the ruins of a place older than any kingdom, she felt the weight of destiny pressing down on her shoulders. "Are you sure this is safe?" she whispered, her voice trembling. Kale's dark eyes met hers, calm and sharp. "Nothing worth achieving is ever truly safe," he said. "This place, it will test us. It will test you, but if we succeed, it will break the curse and free more than just me. It will change everything." Lyra swallowed hard, recalling the night in the forest, the green light, the surge of energy she had felt. She had learned to trust herself more, but she still did not understand the full scope of the power she carried. Yet Kale's confidence, his unwavering belief in her, filled her with courage. The center of the temple was a circular chamber, its floor inscribed with runes that shimmered faintly under the moonlight. A stone altar stood in the middle, covered in cracks, and strange glyphs crawled across the walls as if alive. Kale gestured for her to step forward. "This is where the ritual must be performed," he said quietly. "The curse that binds me, it cannot be broken without the energy that flows through you. You must accept it, Lyra. You must embrace your power fully without fear." Lyra's gaze fell to her hands. The memory of the forest flooded her mind, the green light, the pulsing energy, the moment she had realized she could protect herself, even Kale. She had doubted herself then, but now she understood. She had always carried the strength she needed. I will try," she whispered. Kale nodded, placing his hand gently on her shoulder. "That is all I ask. Trust yourself and trust me." As she stepped closer to the altar, the runes on the floor began to glow brighter, reacting to her presence. The air thickened, charged with energy, and Lyra felt her heart race. She was no longer a shamed Omega, no longer invisible or powerless. She was alive with the magic that had always been part of her, and now it was awakening fully. Kale moved beside her, his aura mingling with hers, stabilizing the raw energy that threatened to overwhelm her. "Focus," he instructed, his voice calm and commanding. "You can control it. Let it flow through you, not against you." Lyra closed her eyes and reached deep inside, feeling the pulse of power that had always been within her. It surged like a river, a tide that threatened to spill over. She embraced it, letting it rise, and for the first time she felt the unity of her strength and Kale's. The temple walls shivered, the runes glowing brighter, casting shifting shadows. Kale placed a hand over hers, and together they channeled the energy into the altar. A blinding light filled the chamber, warm yet searing, and Lyra felt the pull of her own power, the connection between them and the curse that had bound Cale for so long. Pain shot through him, sharp and relentless, but Lyra did not waver. She held the energy steady, guiding it with careful focus. The curse resisted, claws of shadow lashing at them, whispering doubts and fears. Cale's eyes, dark and intense, met hers. "Do not falter," he urged. "We are stronger together." Lyra felt tears stream down her cheeks, not from fear but from the depth of her resolve. She would not fail, not him, not herself. She had come too far, faced too many dangers, embraced too much shame and power to stop now. The runes blazed, and with a final, shuddering pulse, the energy surged into the altar, erupting in light and sound that shook the temple walls. The shadows writhed, screamed, and then dissipated like smoke in the wind. The curse was breaking. Cale fell to one knee, gasping, the weight of the curse lifting from him. Lyra knelt beside him, her hands trembling but steady. He looked at her, his dark eyes softened by exhaustion and relief. You did it," he whispered, voice hoarse. "You saved me, saved us." Lyra shook her head, her own tears glistening in the moonlight. "We did it," she said, "together." The moment was fragile, heavy with triumph, relief, and the unspoken bond that had formed between them. They had faced danger, darkness, and their own fears, and emerged stronger. Lyra's scent, once a mark of shame, now pulsed with power, recognition, and transformation. She had changed. Cale had changed. And together they had altered fate itself. But even in victory, the forest beyond the temple whispered of lingering dangers. Ancient forces, patient and relentless, still watched, still waited. Lyra knew this was not the end, only a turning point. But for now, the weight of triumph allowed her to breathe, to feel, to embrace the bond that had carried them through the storm. Cale reached out, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Look at me," he said softly. "You are not the Omega the world told you to be. You are everything. And I," his voice caught, raw with emotion, "I see you, truly see you. And I will not let anyone take this from you, from us." Lyra's chest tightened with longing and relief. The fear, the shame, the years of invisibility, they were gone, replaced by a fierce connection that neither power nor danger could undo. She leaned toward him, her hands finding his, their fingers entwining. "You see me," she whispered, "even when no one else did." Cale's lips curved into a faint smile, one of the few times Lyra had seen tenderness in his otherwise stern features. "I see all of you," he said. "And that will never change." The night stretched before them, filled with silver light, quiet strength, and the soft hum of magic that lingered in the ruins. Lyra felt the warmth of Cale beside her. The bond that had begun in shame and fear now solidified in trust, courage, and shared power. Yet, even as they held each other close, Lyra sensed the edge of the unknown. The forces that had tried to destroy them, the jealous whispers of the court, the ancient powers of the kingdom, they would not remain idle forever. But now she was ready. They were ready. Together they rose from the altar, stepping into the pale light of dawn that broke through the mist. The forest seemed to breathe with them, the shadows retreating, acknowledging the bond that had been forged through trials, danger, and trust. Cale looked at her, eyes dark and soft, his hand resting lightly on her shoulder. "The world may not forgive us easily," he said. "It may test us, it may challenge the power we have awakened, but we will face it together, always." Lyra nodded, her heart swelling with courage, love, and determination. "Together," she echoed. For the first time in her life she felt whole. The shame of her past no longer defined her. The power she had once feared now surged within her, controlled and steady, guided by trust and purpose. And the Alpha King, once a figure of fear and authority, had become her ally, protector, and the one who saw the truth of her being. As they emerged from the ruins, the rising sun cast golden light over the forest, illuminating the path before them. It was a path of challenges yet to come, of shadows that would attempt to rise again, and of dangers that would test the bond they had forged. but it was also a path of hope, courage, and the beginning of a life that neither of them could have imagined. Lyra took a deep breath, feeling the morning air fill her lungs. She looked at Cale, and in that gaze she saw the reflection of their journey, the struggle, the triumph, and the bond that would guide them through the unknown. And as the first rays of sunlight touched the forest floor, Lyra understood the truth that had been whispered to her all along. She was no longer a shamed Omega. She was strong. She was powerful. She was seen. And with the Alpha King by her side, she would face the world, not with fear, but with courage, strength, and a love that could withstand even the darkest of shadows. The kingdom awaited, full of whispers, threats, and challenges. But for the first time, Lyra felt ready to meet it all. Not alone, not afraid, but together. And somewhere, deep in the forest, ancient magic stirred, acknowledging the bond that had been forged. The bond of trust, power, and undeniable connection between an Omega who had embraced her strength and the Alpha King who had learned to see beyond fear. This was their beginning,